Hi there, this is Terrence Morrissey with Telium. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining for today's webinar. We're going to give it a few more minutes to let some of the folks download the software and get into the webinar, and then we'll get going. Everyone's on silent mode today, but thank you so much to those who are in the webinar. We're looking forward to today's content. Just a couple more minutes here and we'll get started. Looks like we're seeing some folks continue to log in. I know it takes sometimes if you're using new software, you have to download the software. So thank you for your patience while we give these people just a few more minutes to get everything downloaded and logged in, and then we'll get rocking. Cool. Why don't we get started here? So we've got quite a few folks in the webinar. So hello to everyone out there. This is Terrence Morrissey with Telium. Thank you again for joining on this Thursday morning Pacific time for today's webinar, Slacking on Tracking. We're going to walk through a few tricks and tweaks you can easily do to streamline your analytics program via something like a tag management solution. So today's agenda is going to look like this. I'm going to run through a few slides, very brief slides, I promise, to help conceptualize some of the themes that we're going to be looking at today in the product. And then I'm going to hand the reins over to Elizabeth Huebner, and she's going to dive us into the product, and we're going to get into those tweaks and tricks. So let's humanize things a little bit, and hopefully you can see my screen. This is Elizabeth and I. We are real-life human beings. I'm a craft beer nerd, and Elizabeth lived in Italy one time and somehow managed to meet the Pope while wearing her bathing suit. So if we have time at the end of this webinar, maybe we can get into that story. But we've both been with Telium and in the digital analytics space for quite a while, and our goal today is to bring to bear some of the cool tricks, some of the great content that we have picked up in our many years in this space, and just make it actionable and kind of cool to share with you guys on the line today. So a couple quick slides here again to kind of help set the theme for today's content. In our many conversations with digital marketers and analytics folks and ad ops folks, we uncover some pretty standard pain around data collection and data accessibility and availability for analysis. And one of the most common things that we see is without a clean data layer in place, and the data layer, of course, exists to help standardize the way you both define and collect, but also distribute data into your analytics partners. Without a data layer in place, you typically see chaos between the experience layer, so that's where your users are actually engaging your content, and the application layer. Those are your analytics tools, your advertising technologies, and your other digital marketing partners. And that's why tag management has become so foundational to the digital marketing ecosystem. When you have a tag management solution fueled by a clean data layer in place, you begin to really streamline the way you collect data, the way you manipulate data. Ultimately, it gives you that operational control over not only your analytics tools, which is what we're going to focus on today, but again, the other technologies in your digital marketing ecosystem. Now, a little bit of background on Tealium. Tealium markets and develops a customer data platform. Tag management is the most recognizable component of the customer data platform. That's what we're going to focus on, again, for today's purposes. And that represents this notion of, again, operational control over your analytics practice. But once you get the data layer in place and you're streamlining analytics, then you can begin to get into audience segmentation, taking that data that you're collecting and making it actionable from a marketing standpoint. And of course, when you've got a data layer in place, you can not only collect that data at the source, but do some pretty cool stuff around pulling that data into proprietary enterprise data warehouses, for example, or making that data available for consumption via BI tools. When time and cost savings to a streamlined analytics program. A few case studies here. You can read this briefly. You can also go to our website and see some more content there. But I wanted to paint this picture that, yeah, we're going to talk about some cool tricks and tweaks today, and it's going to make your life a little bit easier. But at the end of the day, there are very real bottom line impacts to the way you streamline your analytics organization. And ultimately, Tealium exists to help companies like yours do just that. So you will all be elated to know that's all I have from a slide and sales perspective. And now I'm going to hand the reins to Elizabeth, and we're going to get into the content. In just a moment, folks, thanks for your patience. We are actually using new webinar software. We've been tweaking it and playing with it all morning, but we appreciate your patience as we get some of the tweaks out still while we hand the reins to Elizabeth.
All right. Thank you, Terrence. You should be seeing my screen, so let me know if you are, and I'll move forward.
Yep, we can see your screen. And Elizabeth, I'm getting told, hold on 1 second if you don't mind. It looks like we're having some audio issues. We got some feedback on the chat signal that we're having some audio issues. So your patience again, just one moment while we get that squared away, and then we'll get started.
All right.
It wouldn't be technology if there wasn't an issue.
That, in combination with starting a new presentation software, that's always a fun day.
I know. All right, I'm getting a thumbs up. I think we're good to go, Elizabeth.
Okay, awesome. Well, I should, take about 15 minutes, 20 minutes to run through some of these tips and tricks. And if you guys have questions as we're going through, just feel free to send them over in the chat, and we'll make sure we try to address them on the call today. So Terrence talked a lot about, how a tag manager really can help from an analytics perspective. So I'm going to make sure that we focus on that today. So what you're seeing on my screen here is what you would see when you first log into the Tealium IQ software. And it really gives you an overview of what's going on in your profile environment. So for many of the organizations, you'll have multiple profiles that you can really manage everything for the different domains, subdomains, mobile apps that you guys have, all within this singular user interface. Now, down below, these are really the main building blocks that you'll use as analysts. And it starts with the data sources. So these are all the digital data points that you're going to define and essentially create a localized data dictionary. That data dictionary is going to be used to create conditional logic or load rules. So, the marketers that you support, they don't need to fire all of the tags on every single page. So we provide them a way to really have a lot of control and granularity on when they're actually firing those tags. Then we have the tags themselves. So essentially, we're not collecting any data with the tag management side. We're just listening for the data, and as Terrence mentioned, potentially manipulating it before it goes out to those different third-party vendors that you're using it. And then we have extensions, and extensions are a really big point of differentiation. And when we talk about analytics, these can become, some of the greatest tools that you'll have access to. So as an organization, our software, we really try to focus on making this a solution that everybody can use, a non-technical solution. And so when we saw people doing one-off JavaScript to try to manipulate data, we thought it would be a great opportunity for us to productize those experiences. So we'll talk about extensions and some of those that you may use from an analytics perspective. So let's talk a little bit more about the data layer. So the data layer is essentially what you're going to be seeing here on my screen. And it's just a visual representation of all the digital data that's important from a business perspective and also important from your vendor perspective. What's the data that they need? Having a data layer is, one of the basics that you should be thinking about as digital marketers. We pioneered this concept of the data layer, and it's since become a W3C standard. So it's really important. Now, how do we get data to become part of the data layer? So we have a couple different ways. The first way is through the turnkey integrations that we have. So we've gone out and integrated with major CMS and e-commerce providers and essentially created these bundles. And if I wanted to add in some of these bundles, what it will do is immediately expose all this data, which means I can make sure that this data is consistently used across all of my digital marketing vendors. If I'm not working with one of these provider bundles, what I have the option to do is add in some of these standard bundles to help create these data sources within Tealium IQ just to expedite this process. So these are data points that we found that were common across the thousands of implementations that we've done for our customers. So things like base data sources or e-commerce data sources. As you can see, these are very common data points that you would want to include from an analytics and activation perspective. The other way that we can grab data is through something called our Tealium Web Companion. Now, oftentimes, marketers may want to track new things, or they may need new data points that they might request to become available. Well, with this Web Companion, on the Data tab, what we can do is expose all the data that's currently available on your web page as it stands today. So things like HTML metadata, if I wanted to add those in, things like query string parameters to capture campaign information, search terms, etc., first-party cookies, and JavaScript variables. So this is a really easy way for us to point and click and add these additional data points so they're part of our data layer. Now, once the data layer is in place, again, from your perspective and the roles that you guys are in, it's really helping to provide you with better data, more accurate data, that in turn will result in better and faster insights. Now, the other thing you're probably tasked a lot with is looking at different tags, looking at implementation and different tracking. So one of the things I like to highlight is, first and foremost, depending on the analytics provider that you're working with, we have a very robust marketplace. And this is all customer driven, and we have over 950 turnkey integrations. So you would essentially just search for the analytics vendor that you're working with, and you would be going through a 3-step point-and-click process. And the process is going to be the same no matter what vendor you're going to be adding. So in a sense, it's really nice because you don't have to worry about the nuances. You just have to worry about going through that 3-step process. So what does that look like? Let's take a look at Google Universal Analytics, for example. As I mentioned, the first step of the 3-step process is the tag configuration. So this is where you're essentially going to link up your Tealium IQ account with your analytics provider. You can see here, Tealium provides a lot of really great information to make this a very seamless process. All this helper text here to make sure that you provide exactly what we're looking for. The next step is determining when you want the tag to load. So I had mentioned that we have a lot of flexibility for how we can configure these load rules. By default, we'll load on all pages, but you'll have the ability to create a load rule based on any data point that's in the DOM, but also based on any data point in your data layer. So all of this drop-down is exposing your data layer. You can use full Boolean logic or regex if you guys so choose to use that, and get as granular as you want by adding in additional and, or conditionings, or even date ranges. Now, the most important step in this process is making sure that you can easily take the data that you've created in the data layer and send it over to your vendor. So as you can see here, this drop-down, again, exposes my entire data layer. So if I wanted to take a data point, that's pretty straightforward. I could take something like page name and begin to go through a series of mapping exercises. And this is something, in your role that you're probably doing often, making changes, updating, or going through implementation. So this should be a very straightforward and easy process for you to be able to do. So one of the things is, over here on the left, you'll see all the different categories that Google Universal Analytics has. And over here on the right, you'll see all the custom outputs. So again, this mapping exercise would be as simple as taking the data point from my data layer that's in your organization's own nomenclature and sending it over to an output within Google Universal Analytics. At the conclusion of doing that, one of the really nice things that you'll have is this ability to see every single data point and what's going over. Now, if I go into another analytics vendor, because I know based on some of the customers that we have on the line today, Google Universal isn't the only analytics solution. I just want to drive home one point. So if I go into Site Catalyst as an example, as you can see, it's the same configuration, but when I go and I look at the data sources that I'm sending to Site Catalyst in this case, or Adobe Analytics, that page name, the same way I worked with that data point, it's going to be the same data point that I'm selecting and sending over. So you don't have to think in terms of evars and props. You just have to work with the data that you guys are comfortable with and had originally set up. So any questions so far that have come in from the audience, Terrence, that you want me to quickly address?
Yes. So we have a question that came through. The question was, if I want to create a complete custom data layer, how can I do that? Not based on data source and not included in the variable from Web Companion.
Great question. So if we go back and we want to create something custom, one of the things I should mention, if you already have a data layer in place, we can do a bulk import, and that's going to help create these data sources within Telium. If you want to create something custom and not use an integration or not use the Web Companion, you can add individual data sources as you see fit as well.
Cool, thank you.
Great. Okay, so one of the things from an analytics perspective that we do a lot is add in additional event tracking. So within Telium, another great tool that we have access to is the ability to add in event listeners. So if I use this on-page element selector and hover over any area of my website, I can create a new listener based on a certain type of event. So maybe in this case, I want to add in a jQuery live handler on a view, link, or something custom. And maybe I want to trigger this based on somebody, focusing on this section of the website. What we just walked through here grabs all the content on the website, again, allowing you to work within the comfort of your own site to add in additional event tracking. This is an example of an extension. So if I jump back over to Telium IQ and go to our extension section, you can see here, if I go to this newsletter sign-up focus, it's just inputting all of the jQuery selector and all of the configuration that I set up and allowing me the opportunity to take and associate additional data that should be tied to that event. All of this data can then be sent over to your analytics provider for additional insight for analysis. So again, making that process of event tracking really seamless and simple. But that's only one extension, and I had mentioned in your role that there's several different things that will be of interest. These extensions really can be basic or advanced, and a lot of the basic extensions really focus on that data manipulation. It's one thing to be able to send over all of this data directly to the vendors that need it, but it's another thing to clean up the data and make sure that when it goes out, it's easier to work with and do the analysis on. So something very basic. You know, we've all worked with Excel and reports, and just being able to lowercase data before it goes out is a really nice thing, saves time. So if I add in this lowercasing extension, what we can do is we can scope it to all of our tags, or we can choose just to scope it to our analytics tags, like Google Universal Analytics or Adobe Analytics, whatever the solution is. So within a point-and-click functionality, I've just essentially now taken all of my data and made sure that it is lowercase before it is sent out to the analytics solution. There's also the ability to do things like use lookup tables. So if you want to take a value from your page and pass over a user-friendly value that the entire organization can work with and leverage, this is a really great feature. Or the ability to join data values. So there's some limitations in Site Catalyst with the amount of data that you can send over. Maybe you want to take 3 data points and combine it into one. This is all examples of ways that we can manipulate data and really help you improve the data that you have. Now, on the advanced side, one of the things that I like, while these are more marketing focused, specifically to an analytics perspective, I like to bring up the e-commerce extension. Now, what this is doing is helping with an automatic translation of the e-commerce data that you have and sending that data to key tags that are leveraging e-commerce functionality. So it's essentially that global mapping, and this is going to save you time during implementation, but more importantly, in your role, it's going to make sure that you've got consistent data for the vendors and you're avoiding any data mismappings. Now, one of the things to note is you can change these mappings, and you can change them at an individual tag level as well if you want to overwrite a value for any reason. So lots of great functionality within extensions, and hopefully that, you know, if we have a follow-up call with you, we can dig into some of these even further. The last thing I wanted to point out really quickly is on this versioning tab, I know that there's just a need internally if changes are being made or updates across, you know, the tag management solution. It's nice to know what's going on, especially if that impacts some of your tracking and analysis. So this is going to give you that clean transparency to really help across the organization. And when I'm actually ready to take everything that I've done today and publish it, it's simple, it's easy. I can go ahead and push it out to the different environments that I'm choosing to. And what's probably of most interest to you is understanding that when we do publish all of your tags out across you know, the environment, we do that across a multi-CDN environment. So from a tracking perspective, we can make sure the delivery is effective and as efficient as possible. So we'll actually ping 2,000 nodes every 2.5 minutes and award the traffic to the fastest route each time, so you never really miss out on the delivery. So that's what I wanted to cover off on today. Again, just to recap, making sure that you have a data layer in place, utilizing something like Telium to be able to tap into our experience in building out these data layers and the integrations that we have, leveraging our tag marketplace and the point-and-click functionality to be able to easily implement analytics providers and update any existing configurations, leveraging solutions like our extensions for additional functionality from an event tracking perspective and also from a data manipulation perspective. and then tapping into our deliverability and making sure that we can get these tags out as quickly as possible to make sure we capture as much data. So Terrence, that's
Awesome.
what I have on my end.
Yeah, we got some more questions that have come across. So here's one that came across as pretty good. So if I want to use a tag management solution to manage analytics, what if I have an existing data layer in place already?
Yep. So if you have that existing data layer in place already, as I mentioned, we can go ahead and do a bulk import from the CSV here, and that's going to get everything set up in the original data layer. And then we can go ahead and actually migrate that over, the configuration over into the tag management side for that specific vendor. We actually have a solution in our tag management here to be able to scan your website and identify those tags as well that you are utilizing or that are utilizing the data layer.
Excellent. Another one here. How do we get our event level data into our own database?
So the event level data into your own database. So if you want to take all of the event level data that's sort of fully correlated or sessionized and send it over into an event database, one of the things you could do is look at a solution that Telium offers called Event Store or Event DB. This would have the ability for us to make this data available in an Amazon S3 bucket or in an Amazon Redshift environment, and you guys can, sit visualization tools on top of that. Otherwise, it's just mapping those events directly over to the solution providers that you're using.
What happens if I'm working with an analytics provider not currently in your marketplace?
Great question. So as I mentioned when we were talking through the tag marketplace, all of the tags are really customer driven. So if there's an analytics vendor that we're not working with, we've got a pretty robust list here. What we'll do is we'll get their implementation guide and their vendor code, and we'll actually fully reverse engineer and regression test the code. So again, I stressed a lot on performance, and that's part of our integration into the tag marketplace. And we do this within 5 to 10 business days at no additional cost to you because we want to maintain our position of being neutral. And so we'll work with anybody that you need to work with.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Another one here. Who is often the end user of a tag management solution?
The nice thing about the Tag Manager is that it's built to be a non-technical solution. So marketers would be able to go in here and add in additional tracking or make modifications if they were comfortable, or IT or development resources could go in here and use this as a way to expedite the work that they historically would have had to do. So it just really depends on the organization. But again, the biggest thing is making sure that we build a solution that's easy and making sure that the data that somebody would be working with when they actually go and start working within Telium IQ is all standardized, and there's only sort of this one definition that you're leveraging.
Excellent. So here's a two-part question. Besides building a data layer, what else goes into the implementation process, and what type of training is required?
So when we go through the implementation process, we'll have that strategic conversation about, what's important to your business, what's important to the vendors that you're working with, and we'll go through and build out the data layer. Beyond that, one of the things that we also do on the tagging side is implement the 5 most complex tags, not as a way to, take that work away from you, but we really do it to help train and educate you guys so you feel comfortable and enabled once we hand the keys over. And I would say that 99% of the time, because of our rich experience in the analytics space, our customers will, again, leverage us from a strategic perspective on, is their analytics implementation following best practices, and are there any additional things that they should be looking at or tracking that, we could easily help configure. From an ongoing support perspective, one of the things that, I think is really great is the fact that we've got this entire, guided community here, as well as a learning community, which I'll pull up here. And what this gives you access to is really all of our Telium employees. So our CTO all the way down to, solutions engineers like myself. So if you have questions, if you want to, get thoughts on tracking, if you want to get thoughts on vendors, you can really pose those questions and have access to our entire team. So I think this is a really great additional resource that analysts would have when they're looking for a tool like tag management.
Another question just came across. What department typically manages your solution?
It pretty much, I would say, oftentimes will be with marketing because it's going to enable them to do some of the things or implement some of the campaigns faster. But again, like I said, they can work closely with, depending on where the analytics team sits, with that department to make sure that they have information that they need to be able to do their report and analysis.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you, Elizabeth. I think that has exhausted all of the questions that I see. So if you want to shut your screen share down, I've got one more thing I want to show the audience, and then we will give everyone a few minutes back in their day. That was really good, by the way. And those are great questions. Thank you to everyone in the audience who chimed in with those questions. So
answer.
Yeah, so what I wanted to point out was, we sort of just barely tipped the top of the iceberg today. If there are additional questions you have or follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to either Elizabeth or myself. Our emails are right there. Or check out Trust Radius. We've got around 700 plus enterprise customers using Telium for tag and data management services. And you can get a lot of insight into their experiences via Trust Radius. It's a great place to start. And, of course, we'd love to have a one-on-one conversation with you as well. So with that being said, thanks again to everyone who joined for the webinar today. We really appreciate your time, and we look forward to chatting with you again very soon. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Take care, everyone.